Hello and welcome to Good Morning Magic. It's day 2 of Grand Prix Toronto. I'm Ben Seck. I'm with Jake Van Lunen. We're also joined by Rich Hagen.
Morning.
We've got round 9 action with a game of Magic that I love this. Jake, what were you going to see?
We are going to watch Davies Clarke attempt to take many turns in a row.
Hopefully all of them.
Yes. He's playing a 63-card Time Warp deck.
And his opponent is Jessica Buchanan. What's Jessica running?
So Jessica is playing a blue-white deck, but it's a lot different than the blue-white decks we're used to seeing here. Oh, wait, no, this is the wrong deck list. I'm sorry. Jessica is going to be playing 5-color humans.
There we go. So here's a top pro tip. It's often the one with the name of the player at the top.
Look, when you're up late at night playing a lot of
You should stop
Magic.
that now. You should stop that, the pair of you. Meanwhile, in professional land, Davies Clarke has laid a fairy conclave and a couple of very nice islands, and here's a Jace.
So what's the engine in Davies Clarke deck?
So essentially what you want to be doing is you want to be taking a whole bunch of turns in a row and then gaining an advantage on those turns. And the way you gain an advantage on each of those turns is either through Dictate of Crewfix, having some number of Ancestral Visions ticking down, or by having a Planeswalker like Jace Beleren on the battlefield.
Okay. So Jessica's on the 5-color humans deck that was very popular at the Pro Tour last weekend. She looks a little bit constrained on mana. She missed a second land drop, but she did have Aether Vial, which kind of makes up for that. Plays a Thalia's Lieutenant, adding 2 counters to her Champion of the Parish, and able to get big enough to get rid of that Jace Beleren. How important is that Jace? Is it is it a big problem, or is it something that Davies kind of expected to lose?
I think it's a pretty big problem. I think it's important for Davies to have some way to be gaining an incremental advantage once the time warps start coming. If you're just time warping and there's nothing extra happening while you're time warping, then it's not nearly as powerful. That Ancestral Visions that he just suspended is in many ways going to be similar to that Jace.
Okay.
Vision.
So in the meantime, Jessica has vialed out a Phantasmal Image, which is copying her Thalia's Lieutenant, and basically adding a counter to all the other humans in play. Now, the Ancestral Vision, as you were saying before, is good with the turns deck, obviously, because the suspend counters, they'll be reduced faster, basically, if you take your own turns more.
Yeah, every time you cast the Time Warp, you're going to tick down that suspend counter one more time. And even though you're not drawing all of those extra cards, like an extra card per turn up front, it's kind of like you're drawing an extra card per turn each time you Time Warp because of the way the Visions pays you back in the end.
Okay, so Davies, in response to the Noble Hierarch on Jessica's side, uses Gigadrouse and replicates it. So it basically acts as a fog, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Davies needs to be doing in this matchup. This is a pretty rough matchup for Davies. Davies is somewhat linear combo deck, but the power of Davies' deck is that it's really hard to hate on the combo. The disadvantage is that his combo is quite a bit slower than most of the other combos that people might be playing in Modern.
Okay, what are the other ways that kind of Davies tries to slow down the game? I mean, we've got Gigadrouse. What else have we got?
So we have Gigadrouse, we have Cryptic Command, we have 1 copy of Elixir of Immortality.
Ooh.
And I imagine once Davies gets to the point where he has a whole bunch of Time Warps in the graveyard and has most of the lands out of the deck, it might be pretty nice to Elixir of Immortality and fill the graveyard up with, or fill the deck back up with Time Warps.
Okay, so Davies doesn't have a 5th land, so it doesn't have the mana requisite to play another Time Warp, though it looks like he has a Cryptic Command in hand, so that really is all he needs to not take too much damage. I mean, you have a look at that Champion of the Parish. I believe it is a 7/7 right now, not a 10/10. I know that looks upside down.
Yeah.
And also a 5/5 Thalia's Lieutenant. So it's going to be a lot of damage, and Davies if he ever lets Jeskai ever attack again, is going to be in a bit of trouble. But he does have a cryptic command.
Especially with the Vial on the battlefield, if he allows an attack here, it is likely to just be the end of the game.
Okay. So after combat, after the beginning of turn, I think Jeskai is vialing out a Mantis Rider, and since it's still before the attack step, she's able to attack for 3. And she follows that up with a Kite Sail Freebooter. Now, Davies' hand has an island, which I presume he just drew off the Cryptic Command, a Remand, or 2 Remands actually, a Serum Visions, and a Walk the Aeons.
Yeah, now, we've been pretty unimpressed with Remand in these turns decks, actually. It's a card that we found ourselves sideboarding out in the vast majority of our matchups, and eventually it just came out of our deck entirely. It is, in many ways, a time walk, though.
Yes.
And an inexpensive time walk. I think against many decks in the format, decks that are not pressuring you on the first turn, it's one of the very best cards this deck could play, but when you're playing against a deck like Humans, they've Ether Vial in addition to having a bunch of inexpensive cards, and Remand just is quite a bit weaker than a lot of the other things you could have.
Okay. So she takes the Walk the Aeons. And another Time Walk. This is one of the cards that really makes the deck tick, and it's a Temporal Mastery, which is a miracle version of Time Warp, but it only costs 2 if you get to play it off the top of your deck. Do you want to just quickly explain the miracle mechanic just for players out there who haven't actually experienced it?
Yeah, so what the miracle mechanic does, it's a pretty fun mechanic, I'd say. If it's the first card you've drawn for the turn, you can reveal the card, pay its miracle cost, and cast it for its miracle cost. So Temporal Mastery, while it's a 7-mana Time Walk, is actually just a Time Walk if you are just revealing it off the top of your deck.
Okay, so Davies draws a Time Warp off the top of his deck and then is able to target himself, which gives him the extra turn he needs to actually bridge to that Ancestral Vision, which means that he gets to draw 3 cards during his upkeep. And then, I believe he forgot to draw his draw step. And there we go. We're getting there.
Well, when you've got all those turns, one draw step's not that big a deal, is it?
Okay.
It looks like
he might actually just be out.
Yeah, I think he's just dead. I think that, earlier in this game, it's likely that Davies, on the turn where he had miracled the Temporal Mastery, he could have cast Serum Visions and remanded his own Serum Visions, and then he would still have an additional Serum Visions. That probably could have given him an extra draw step, gotten him 1 card deeper, so he revealed the top card of his deck. It was a Walk the Aeons. If he had seen that line, it might have made that game go a little bit differently.
Oh. Well, we've had a religious moment in chat, I'm glad to say, gentlemen. We obviously chose the right deck. We had someone going, Solar Flare 88 says, 7-1 with taking turns. God bless you, my master. So someone's happy at least. Good. We're custom for you, Solar Flare. So if you are just joining us, you're watching Good Morning Magic with me, Rich Hagan, him, Ben Sek, keeping the Robin Williams dream alive, and Jacob Van Lunen. It's Jess Buchanan against Davies Clarke. We're going to watch the whole of this match, and then our Time Warp match is going to be a stonking affair because we have an Ameria control match. We like to bring you lots of cool decks, as we like to say, the more the Ameria. And yes, quite. And he is up against one of Canada's finest, Mr. John Stern. So that's going to be a good one. Looking forward to that.
Rich, I think you got this backward, though. This is the Time Warp match. That one. That one is the other.
Oh, and after the Time Warp match, I'll have the other Time Warp match, the one without the Time Warp.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, that's not ideal for a Sunday morning start, is it? Really? Yeah, that's going to be Mason Forster, who's playing the Ameria control deck against John Stern. Meanwhile, Dan Ward, one of the stories of yesterday, someone, I think 4 GP top 8s to his name, He came in real early and said he thought that his Boggles deck was fantastically well positioned. Well, he played, as you do in Modern, a million different decks on day one, well, 6, and beat them all. So he is currently one of our 10 co-leaders. Remember, because we have only 8 rounds now on day one, that undefeated record is, well, it's literally 1 round easier to get to. So we have 10 rather than 4 or 5 perfect records coming in to day 2.
Okay, Jake, with this matchup, I mean, we actually were playing a Taking Turns deck in our hotel room last night, so we're actually pretty well versed in this matchup. How does it go with 5-color humans? I mean, they seem to have a lot of disruption. I mean, like Kitesail Freebooter, Meddling Mage, Thalia. This seems like a nightmare for the Taking Turns deck.
I think it is a nightmare. I think of all the matchups that we've played with the Taking Turns deck, this has been far and away the most difficult.
And it's really one of the reasons why this deck isn't that popular, because 5-color humans is really popular, and so it's suppressed it a little bit.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I mean, besides humans, we've just been winning, though.
So
all
right.
many turns.
But, yes, all right. So calm down. We're in public, remember. The viewers can't see us, but everyone out there in the room can. So, what I want to ask, in all seriousness, you can redeem yourself from all that hard research you were doing for day 2, if I'm going to be charitable. What is the path to possible victory against 5-color humans? Do either? I mean, you say you were losing to it, but so is there a game plan for Davies here?
Yeah, so I think if Davies gets an opportunity to have so let's say he has a Giga Drowse or something that allows him to survive to his 5th turn. If he can slow Jessica's draw down so that she does not kill him on her 4th turn, then on his 5th turn, if he's able to untap with a Dictative Crewfix in play, the game will look very good for him. I think besides that, it's going to be really difficult for him to win.
Okay, so in a sense, he is significantly advantaged in game 2 because that is 1 fewer turn for Jessica to kill him before he might get to that point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's going to make a big difference for him.
Okay, so we hope, in the nicest way, sorry, Jessica, we're kind of rooting for game 2 for Davies to do something cool here, because otherwise we'll be very sad and we'll be taking turns on other tables instead.
Okay.
So the 5-color humans deck, it's just a nightmare on so many fronts, because not only is the deck so aggressive, but it's also very disruptive. Meddling Mages and Kitesail Freebooters can pick apart your hand while the deck is just unloading, piles upon piles of threats that kill you really fast. And the Taking Turns deck, while it is powerful and gets to ignore a lot of what the opponent's doing, that means that it cannot interact well with these disruptive permanents that the humans deck plays.
I've been taking lessons from people who know lots about the internet at spotting trolls. So when someone asks, is this a Time Walk match? I'm a little bit suspicious.
I don't know what you're talking about. That seems like a reasonable question.
Okay, so here's Cavern.
Cavern, I presume that she named human and not
Illusion?
Or the other creature type of champion of the parish, but so Davies has used his first 2 turns to suspend 2 ancestral visions, because there's 2 of them now.
Yes.
And really a good way of setting up and making sure that when he does actually get to the crucial turns of 5 and 6, he has more time warps to be able to bridge those turns.
And now here we see Jessica with Thalia, Guardian of Throbbing, and this is a 2-mana, 2/1 first striker that makes all non-creature spells cost an additional mana, and this card is a nightmare for the blue turns deck. Davies is going to have to pay a mana during his upkeep when the Ancestral Vision comes off of Suspend to just get that Ancestral Vision. All those Time Warps are going to cost extra mana. For Davies to win this game now, I think he's going to need at least 1 miracle.
Yes. Like either a literal miracle or...
I was going to say, are we in a mechanical sense or in a biblical sense?
I think either or.
Arguably both.
Yeah.
Though she does have a snapback in her sideboard, which is it's basically like a fancy unsummon. The fancy bit being that you can actually pay it for free by discarding a card from your hand.
There we go.
Discarding a blue card from your hand. So Jeskai continues the disruptive spells and casts a Sin Collector, which is able to nab a Temporal Mastery out of her hand, leaving Davies with only 2 islands. So
just so you know, Itchimus in chat thinks it's not all over. Oh no, paying 1 and a blue mana to draw 3 cards. Whatever will he do?
Oh my goodness! It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Hallelujah.
It's a Valentine's Day miracle, people.
Not a Valentine's Day massacre.
So what this allows Davies to do is basically get to play an extra land, but I think even more importantly, get to tick down those Ancestral Visions an extra one.
Do we get to go tick, 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 boom?
So what Davies is doing is he's stacking those abilities in his upkeep in the order that he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
Puts a Mikokoro into the graveyard.
It's kind of a cool card.
And then what he's doing is basically casting it with Suspend, the other Ancestral Vision, but he has to pay 1 because of the Thalia on Jessica's side of the board.
Yeah, now I believe that Davies found an Exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
And Exhaustion is going to allow Davies to get at least 1 more turn, maybe a pair of extra turns even.
Okay. So Jessica skips her untap. So really kind of, force it, though Jessica gets to draw, a lot of what she wants to do, which is attack with her creatures, doesn't happen. Only can attack for 2 with the Sin Collector. Davies getting an super important untap. Also getting that Ancestral Vision again off Suspend.
Griffin 888 wants to know, Rich, was that a Will Smith song reference? Who is Will Smith?
He's the Fresh Prince, Rich.
From West Philadelphia, born and raised. That
Yes,
one.
correct.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
that's William Smith.
Yes,
is
he
it?
is. It's William Smith Esquire.
He's not the same as Will I Am.
No.
That's
That's
a
wrong.
different William.
No,
or Prince William. Those aren't the same either.
Yeah, so actually,
Okay.
he's not William. I believe.
Oh.
I believe the long.
Willis?
No, it's actually Willard. I believe.
Willard?
I believe it's Willard.
Ah, as in the opera singer Willard White.
Yes, that's
Which, of
right.
course,
yeah,
is
of
not
course.
in your range at all.
Don't worry. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Oh, my God. Meanwhile, back at the Magic, Davis Clarke. Help.
Okay, so Davies Clarke plays an Elixir of Immortality.
Yes, I love that card.
I mean, that's kind of a sweet one here, right? Because that 4 life, I think, is going to guarantee that Davies gets to untap, and 5 life, yeah. It's going to guarantee that Davies gets to untap, and if Davies untaps here, I'm hard-pressed to imagine a situation where the game doesn't just end.
Or keep on going.
Yeah, keep on going. Well, yeah. If the game doesn't just end for Jessica.
Okay, so Jessica is going to try and end the game here.
Ooh, okay.
A Phantasmal Image, which is going to target a Sin Collector, which is really a rough situation here because I think there's only one. Oh, there's 2 Warps, so he's going to have 2 options.
Yeah, if Jessica does not have a Meddling Mage or an additional copy of Phantasmal Image and or Kitesail Freebooter here, then I think Davies is still in a pretty decent position, though it's not quite as commanding as it would have been had Davies been able to untap with a pair of walks, obviously.
Okay, so she decides to remove the walk the Aeons, thinking that Davies can pretty much cast either of them, so she'd rather take away the option of buyback if he should choose to do so. And actually, as you said, Jake, she follows up with Meddling Mage. I'm going to guess that she's going to name the Time Warp in Davies' hand.
You're just going to take a wild stab in the dark.
I mean, it could be Dictate of Crufix, I guess, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But Davies is able to shuffle and gain 5 life, more importantly, with his Elixir of Immortality.
Can confirm from the floor, Time Warp named with Meddling Mage.
Okay.
So one thing that's a little odd about having sacrificed the elixir here, and I think you need to, but Davies will not be able to flip that Search for Azcanta on the following turn.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so takes down the Ancestral Vision, uses the Azcanta ability, hopefully looking for some sort of Time Walk effect that is castable. Though it doesn't look like he has one. He does have a Jace.
Okay.
Now, Davies is at 7.
Yeah, it seems unlikely that Davies is going to survive to take another turn.
Okay.
No, boo.
It's like, I guess we didn't do the Time Warp again, so...
Oh, that's sad moment.
Yeah, this is a sad moment.
Yeah, I appreciate the musical
Happy for
theatre reference
Jessica.
like that. That was,
Yeah,
that was
and also
good.
Jessica, she set herself up well. She knew what mattered in the matchup on the right turn before Davies was just going to go off. A Phantasmal Image copied a Sing Collector. It gave Jessica perfect knowledge of what was in Davies' hand, and then she used that knowledge to play a Meddling Mage to shut off the one card that was going to keep Davies' engine going, and the match ended.
So
well played on her part.
So what other decks did the two of you jokers, spend 5 hours testing last night?
None. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was the one.
Yeah.
It's really,
Thanks.
really fun.
Great. Well, we're on table 2 now, and that means Luke Purcell with Jeskai control against Dan Ward. These are 8-0, 2 of your 10 undefeated players. Dan Ward already 1-0 up. Also, with a core Spirit Dancer sitting there with Rancor on it. Bit of trample action, and he's trying to finish Luke Purcell off here. Snapcaster Mage is all that's in the way, and there's a Runed Halo over there. Wonder what's going on with that.
Okay, so Dan has won the first game. As you said, Rich, he has a core Spirit Dancer with a Rancor. I think they're just getting a judge ruling right now. And so,
or just doing some hand dancing.
Yeah. So we're just going to... Also, so Luke has a... Like, how's the matchup for this? I mean, like, Boggles is kind of a fringe but known deck. And Jeskai Control, usually is a deck that is able to be built in such a way to beat some decks if it wants to. Is this a good matchup for Jeskai, or is it more on the Boggles side?
So I think Boggles is pretty heavily favored in the first game, and then Jeskai Control becomes mildly favored for games 2 and 3. It's one of those modern matchups that's a lot closer than some might expect. I think that once the Jeskai Control deck gets access to more board sweepers, the deck becomes a lot more powerful in the matchup. I think the Umbras are really, really important for the Boggles deck. Here at this point in the game, it looks like Luke Purcell has weathered the storm. Down to 4 now, but Dan Ward seems like he's just completely out of gas here. And with all those cards in Luke Purcell's hand, it seems like we're probably going to see a third game here.
Yeah, it does look like there's such a Azcanta for Luke. He's basically trying to play pretty fast because he knows that they need to go to game 3, and Jeskai Control, while does have quite a lot of threats, can take a while to actually kill his opponent. And Dan, he's just got how many land out? 9 mana in play, which is almost unheard of for Boggles.
Yeah, I imagine this game has been going on for a very long time. We looked through Luke Purcell's graveyard for a moment there, and while doing so, you probably saw a Sphinx's Revelation that was on top of about 9 other cards, one of which was a Supreme Verdict. So I imagine these two have been playing Game 2 for quite some time. Game 1 may have gone a little bit quicker.
So Dan Ward uses his Windswept Heath to search out a Dryad Arbor, giving him at least a threat to try and put some pressure on Luke here. But as we were saying before, Luke has a lot of cards in hand, so it seems very unlikely that this is going to be good enough by itself.
Yeah, and before I talked about how important the Umbras are, but the Umbras are important to put specifically on hexproof creatures. If you just put an Umbra on something like a Dryad Arbor or a Core Spirit Dancer, Luke Purcell is going to have cards like Path to Exile or Cryptic Command, and then you get punished pretty badly.
So, Dryad Arbor is kind of a weird kind of thing in Boggles. Like, it's in most of the decks, but it's neither a hexproof creature nor something that interacts with auras. What's its purpose there? Like, why do they put a slot of a land that actually can't tap on turn 1 to cast a Slippery Boggle or a Gladecover Scout?
So a lot of the time when you're playing a deck like Boggles, your opponent will play a board sweeping effect, something that kills all the creatures in play. And when they do so, all of your hexproof creatures die, usually, if you don't have Umbras on them. And then what you can do is you can sacrifice something like a Windswept Heath on their end step. You search your library for a Dryad Arbor, all their mana's tapped, you toss some auras on it, and you attack and you win the game. And that's kind of the idea behind the Dryad Arbor here.
Mm-hmm. Also, it can be good against Liliana the Veil, searching out a fodder, because one of the best ways of dealing with hexproof creatures is Liliana, and so getting a creature unexpectedly from your deck with just a land is also pretty cool.
Absolutely. It's definitely very good protection against those types of effects.
Okay. Dan actually with a hexproof creature, Gladecover Scout, but Luke is having none of it, making it very illogical with his Logic Nut.
I always get hungry when that card gets played because I think of Garlic Knot, and it's just like, oh god, I want one of those.
Garlic Knot what? What is it then?
No, it is. It's not.
It's not garlic.
It's not. No. It is both garlic and it's both garlic and not garlic.
Oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Like so much of the commentary.
With Field of Ruin, dealing with Dryad Arbor. Field of Ruin's a card that has been getting more and more and more popular in Modern over time.
Yeah, really. Like a lot of people have said a bunch of decks became viable because of Field of Ruin, because it was it's one of the land suppression lands that doesn't actually put you back mana if you're using it in a control deck or something like that.
In case you're wondering, it's Sunday here at least, and that means you're watching Good Morning Magic. With me, Rich Hagan, him Ben Sek, and him Jacob Van Lunen. It's 1-1 in our second match here in round 1. First couple of rounds this morning, Good Morning Magic looks to bring you some of the more unusual decks in the room. We've just seen taking turns not have a huge amount of success, taken down by the 5-color humans deck of Jessica Buchanan. Later in our Time Warp match this round, we're going to see an Ameria control deck in action up against John Stern. Not sure what John Stern's playing, come to think of it. We'll see what goes on there. We've got another couple of decks that we want to showcase for you in round number 10, by which time we'll probably be down to either 1 or 2 perfect records left in the tournament. And then you'll be in the company of Riley Knight and Eduardo Sajgalit. They'll be along to kick off our coverage of MTG Red Zone. That's all the matches that matter down the stretch, rounds 11 through 15. And then, of course, Sunday Night Magic, our flagship show, where we bring you all the action from the top 8. So I have a question for you, JVL. Just a yes or no is all I require. Now, you understand the rules here. One-word answer. Mm-hmm. Is Gideon the truth?
Yes.
So if Gideon's the truth, how is Gideon a lie of Zendikar?
Can I leave here?
Can you live here?
No.
You can live beside me anytime you want.
Ben and I are going to go and play Magic Online.
Oh, I wonder what you're going to play. What do you think, chat? Should we just go for the solo cast and they can play Magic Online off in the corner?
I think it's a great idea. We can just cast Time Warps.
That's right. Just one more turn. Just please. One more
You just want that one extra. Is that, like, do you genuinely, so that a proper question, I promise there's no joke coming, and that means there isn't one, chat. So, seriously, it's a deck where when you lose, you are almost always one turn short? Do you always get to nearly the finish line, but never there?
Yeah, I think that's the nature of the turns deck. It always looks like it's kind of skating on the edge of just about to lose because it has, especially in the version we just saw, so many ways of like bridging another turn until...
So it's hold on and still need another top deck and please tick down one more on the Ancestral Vision. It sounds like a really stressful deck to play.
Imagine it's like midnight and you're sitting there and it looks like everything's hopeless. And then you draw for the turn, and it's Temporal Mastery, and suddenly you cannot possibly lose.
Until you got to draw for the turn, I was right with you. 12:30, you're sitting there, everything seems hopeless. I was like, yep, this sounds like pretty much every Tuesday.
Okay. So it looks like Dan Ward back to the match.
Yeah, let's do this. All right, game number 3, Dan Ward with Boggles. I thought we bridged that shuffling segment beautifully. Well done, gentlemen.
Well, we may need to bridge the shuffling a little bit more because Dan is taking a second mulligan.
In that case, I'm going to complain bitterly about what Army of Thalia has just said in chat. This is wrong in so many ways. Rich trying to step up his puns game to LSV levels. There's like almost every word in that is just offensive and wrong.
It's true. It's unbelievable.
I actually hired you, didn't I?
Look, I'm here, basically to be funnier than you, Rich.
Good luck with that. Ambition is great.
Look,
I like that. That's good.
I like shooting for the stars.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's like a great deal of like regret though, because you would more than likely rather be playing the turn deck in this Grand Prix.
Between you and me, chat, it wouldn't surprise me if at some point this afternoon I look up to the booth to see these two commentating on a match that they're covering live whilst playing Magic Online. I would put the over-under at that as, I think that's a kind of push right now. I'm a little concerned between us all.
Okay, Dan did keep his 5-card hand. He's now just contemplating his scry, but he keeps on top.
This is the kind of deck, though, that can actually survive off a 5-card mulligan, right? You just go, well, here's my hexproof, and now I'm putting something on it, and something else, and something else. Rancor. You see, here we go.
It's an angry tree. It's a Dryad Arbor that has both Rancor and a Hyena Umbra on it. Certainly not the most ideal target for those auras.
No, not at all. But you kind of have to do what you have to do. And Dan Mulligan down to 5. He's probably thinking to himself, all right, what I need to do here if I'm going to win this game is dodge Path to Exile. And perhaps even dodge Cryptic Command, because I don't know if he'll be able to finish the game off before Luke gets to 4 mana.
Luke actually having a hand that doesn't look like it reacts to the board very much. He had a Logic Knot, which he couldn't use to counter the Dryad Arbor, obviously, because you can't counter land. Not yet, anyway. And doesn't look like he has a Cryptic or a Path, though. He's put a... Oh, no, he does have a white card in the front of his hand, and I'm pretty sure that is a Path to Exile.
Correct.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that is likely the game.
So Dan's able to use it to search out a basic land from his deck. He's going to get the Rancor back to his hand. the other 2 auras are going to go to the graveyard, but like one of them can come back in the form of Griffspoon, can actually be kind of reanimated.
Reanimated later on. And there is a Glade Cover Scout.
So I don't think the tunnel has darkened completely for Dan's path to winning this match.
By the way, that is stunning art on Griffspoon. Dan won't care right now, but it is gorgeous.
Yeah, you have to like think about it a little bit before you realize the horse body on the bird. You know?
Right.
Wait a second.
Oh, people talking about Forest Judge. Forest should be tapped, they're saying.
Yes.
Something.
That is true. Yes, no, like the Path to Exile puts the land into play tapped. I think that Dan may have inadvertently put it into play untapped and cast that Glade Cover Scout.
Dan had not played a land for turn yet.
I think we've reached that hand dancing part of the
Not realized.
the match again.
Yeah.
So note down from on the floor. Our life bar operator down there says they're backing up the game. The land for the path obviously comes into play tapped. Both players didn't realise it. So that's from about 1.5 foot away from what you're seeing on screen right now.
We think the Ice Age Forest there.
Yep. It was caught quick enough
Sky.
that we can back up to that situation. So no harm, no foul for the moment. Luke really now kind of in charge of the game. I mean, Dan has no threat in play, and really, like, Luke actually has a mana ready to actually deal with that Glade Cover should he
Redeploy?
yes, redeploy it.
Although technically it's just deploy, isn't it? Because the first time wasn't actually happened and we backed up. It's like we took another turn in a sense.
Yes. It basically never happened. I feel like...
We took another turn. Did we go back to a different match?
Yeah, but when you're able to cast Path to Exile on a Dryad Arbor that's enchanted by 3 things, it generally bodes well for you. And I think that was the major point in this game where Luke felt like he had this one. Dan also on a mulligan to 5 here. We talked a little bit about when we first came to this match, how the matchup plays out, and Dan's trying to get aggressive. He's trying to be underneath Luke. In many ways, he's trying to dodge the board sweeping effects while having a bunch of auras on a hexproof creature. Umbra's also helped in that regard. When you mulligan to 5, it's hard to engineer that perfect Voltron.
A reminder that when this is done, which might not be too long, we'll be showing you the Time Warp match of Mason Forster against John Stern. That features Mason Forster on Ameria Control. So looking forward to bringing you that one here on the show, and then we'll be heading towards our second round of our opening show on day 2. It's Good Morning Magic with Rich and Ben and JVL. Any way back for Dan Ward? Ooh.
I don't think so. I think Luke is really, really kind of getting to...
The corner has been thoroughly turned.
Yeah, so there's something about Modern where most decks, it doesn't matter how far behind they are, something crazy could happen which would allow them to win. Boggles is not one of those decks. Once the engine runs out of gas with Boggles, you're stuck on the side of the road. There's you can't call your insurance company. You can't do any. No, it doesn't work like that. You are an uninsured driver, and your car is like permanently dead. Like there's not even a way to put more gas into it if somebody came and gave you more.
I do like this analogy of like cars to decks. Yeah. So if it's kind of the second-hand car you bought off like Craigslist and.
Yeah, don't try that with Marshall, because he'll say, are you talking about the 1971 E Special Edition or the 1972 where the torque had been changed to... Yeah. Marshall knows that stuff. You can't just talk about second-hand this. No.
My wife and I have a blue car.
We are very excited. It has 4 wheels.
So Luke has drawn a secure the waste, which is really the way that he actually finishes the game. He's casting it for 7, which, you know, if nothing else changes, 3 turns later is going to end up with Dan in the graveyard.
Do you know the best thing about corsets? They secure the waists.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway. So there's the
I was going to say lightning bolt because it's also a corset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, corsets. Okay.
Oh my God. And now live via satellite, Jacob Van Lunen.
So, yeah, with the Celestial Colonnade, it's going to be lethal on the following attack. So even though Luke Purcell only has 7 points of power there, it's actually 11, thanks to that creature land he has on the battlefield.
All right, boys and girls. We're done. Luke Purcell gets there, and he advances to 9-0. Dan Ward falls to 8-1. That's enough for our live magic here in round number 9, but we'll be right back with more action. Time Walk coming right up.
Welcome to our city guide for the first double event of the year, Grand Prix Seattle, Standard and Legacy. For this one, we got some sweet shots of things that you get to do around the city while you're there. Let's check them out. Welcome to Seattle, the home of Magic the Gathering and the home of our first double GP this year in April. We're here to give you a look at some of the cool things you can do in town, starting with the Space Naval. Built in 1962 for the World's Fair, it is 600 feet tall and is built to withstand earthquakes, massive winds, and has 25 lightning rods. Because with a building this big, you really want to be sure. Before the elevators were installed, workers commuted to work in a metal bucket. That's absolutely ridiculous. The views are amazing. You can see all of downtown, you can see Mount Rainier and like Elliott Bay and everything, and it actually is, even on what's like kind of a little bit of a foggy day, you can still see everything. It's actually awesome. Major part of the Space Needle is that the entire thing is filled with the intoxicating smell of caramel popcorn, which like I had to get a bag. I didn't remember doing it. I was just drawn in by it and I had to get it. Oh, it's so good. It's actually really good. Yeah. Come to the world's first ever Starbucks and try their special Pike Place roast. This is Pike Place Market, the #1 tourist attraction in Seattle. It's over 100 years old and is easily the best place in the state to see a fish get hurled 3 feet in the air. This is just a stone's throw from the Space Needle and is the Globe Fountain. It's this awesome water show fountain that plays music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's really cool because it's all lit up at night. This is the Artist Playground at the Seattle Center, which is kind of just a playground by day, but it's also a bunch of musical instruments. The swings have wind chimes attached to them. There's an entire pipe piano kind of thing you can play over there. It's actually really cool, and at night the whole thing's super quiet. The playground is also the only thing on our entire trip that has the coveted Jane's seal of approval. You having a good time? And this is GameWorks, a retro-style arcade right next to the convention center where you can play a bunch of old-style arcade games and win carnival tickets. So if you're coming into town to walk away with a giant plushy snake, this is the place to do it.
When you're in Seattle, one of my favorite restaurants to go to is called Wild Ginger. It's not that far from the venue. Get the 7-flavor beef. You're welcome.
This is the Washington State Convention Center, which you'll be pleased to know is right in the middle of the city, which means there's tons of food, hotels, and things to do around here. And it's easy to find because of this giant archway. If you're flying into Seattle-Tacoma, or SeaTac as the locals call it, the best way to get to downtown Seattle is with the Light Link rail straight from the airport. Be it for Standard or for Legacy, we can't wait to see you at GP Seattle.
Hello everyone, Rich Bensek and Jacob Van Lunen. You're watching Good Morning Magic. And we are at Time Walk time, the time shifted match, if you will, because earlier we saw Taking Turns, which also has Time Walk. So anyway, moving on, welcome. We're going to cut straight to game number 2. Game 1 was over in a bit of a blizzard. Let's get to game number 2. Here it is. We've got John Stern with Burn. Stern the Burn on the left against Mason Forster with Ameria control. So let's get to it. Here is Bensek and Jacob Van Lunen.
Okay, Ameria. It's a legendary land from Zendikar that is not Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. So how does this deck work?
So we've seen Ameria from time to time show up in Modern and/or Extended. It's often joined by things like Martyr of Sands. This version is using it with Sun Titan, Phantasmal Image, Lone Missionary, Court Hussar, Wall of Omens, Flicker Wisp.
Oh.
So how Ameria works is if you have 7 planes in play at the beginning of your upkeep, I believe you get to reanimate a creature from your graveyard.
Okay, so and John Stern is on Burn, which is defined by a lot of direct damage spells and a lot of creatures with haste.
God, that Wall of Omens just looks so good right now.
It's true. I'm pretty sure that Mason is going to go block that Goblin Guide.
And presumably John has a second land and then can burn the wall out of the way with the rest of the damage. But even so, that's so good, that wall.
In fact, I think he may not actually have another land available.
Oh, no!
So that wall already paying dividends.
Yeah, and I imagine this matchup is pretty good for Mason Foster. I mean, he has 3 Lone Missionary and 4 Wall of Omens in the main deck. Post-board, going up to 4 copies of Lone Missionary.
Okay, and there is the aforementioned Lone Missionary.
Gaining 4 life?
That's
Is
right.
that right? Yep.
So Mason has blue in his deck. He's got an island in his hand. He's got a Prairie Stream.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's the blue for?
So the blue is for Phantasmal Image, Supreme Verdict, Spreading Seas, Detention Sphere. So Spreading Seas has been very good in the current Modern format. The fact that his deck can, just prolong the game and gain this incremental advantage long term with something like Ameria. He's just trying to make the game last a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, his deck kind of looks like it's a tap-out control deck. There's no counter magic in his deck. He does have some of the blue cards that you expect: Supreme Verdict, Detention Sphere, Spreading Seas, but there's no hint of any counter magic, no cryptic commands, just a lot of spells.
And not in the board either?
No, the board does have counter magic, but I doubt we're going to see much of it against this burn deck.
Right.
We might see 1 copy of Dispel.
Right, yeah, just curious to get a sense of what the whole package was.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually quite surprised that Mason there chose not to trade off the Lone Missionary. I think that leads me to believe that he understands this matchup on a much different level than I do.
Okay, so actually what he's done is to deploy another Lone Missionary and use the Phantasmal Image to copy it. This seems to be like a package of cards that he knows what he wants to do. I mean, with the image, he knows against burn, 4 life is as good as almost a counterspell because most spells do 4 or less.
I think also now that we see the Phantasmal Image, it probably leads us to believe that on the turn prior, he drew the Lone Missionary, and maybe the reason he didn't block with Lone Missionary was that he wanted to copy it with Phantasmal Image.
No, but he also has decided to turn the corner here. I mean, he's attacking with his creatures. I mean, at 25-18, he does have the life advantage despite John Stern being a burn deck.
Yeah, I mean, able to serve back now. Things have really worked out in his favor. He's gained 12 life now off of Lone Missionary triggers.
Okay. Now, John is basically deciding whether he needs to trade some of his cards. I mean, it seems like a rough situation being down on mana and your opponent is attacking you even though they're a control deck.
Yeah, certainly not where John wants to be in this matchup.
Yeah, I think Olivala in chat is like, as a burn player, this is heart-wrenching to watch. Yeah, car crash magic, I'm afraid, from the burn side.
I can imagine all the burn players crying into the cereal right now.
Yeah.
It's like just a hint of Schadenfreude in the statement, you know.
I'm on the white-blue side here. I'm happy to see some of these creatures.
See, I don't know if I'm on a side. This is so classic for me, a white-blue control deck against a burn deck. I feel like this is a match of Magic I've watched 1,000 times.
Mason Forster basically following up with another Wall of Omens, putting up the shields. It looks like he drew a Supreme Verdict, so I can imagine that if John is able to like deal with some of these lone missionaries, he's going to basically follow up with the uncounterable Wrath of God.
Yeah, interesting choice there, Mason. Choosing to not put the Hallowed Fountain into play untapped to cast Gideon of the Trials, instead just preserving his life total a little bit.
So I'm sort of looking ahead to a potential game 3 here, and you're just thinking about mapping out John Stern and going, okay, so Goblin Guide on 1, hit you, make another Goblin Guide on 2, and then Mason Forster makes a wall, and John Stern, and I'm thinking about a card like Boros Charm and thinking, okay, so you double strike one of your dudes, which then kill the wall, and that's, I mean, Boros Charm's meant to do 4 to the face at the end of their turn, yes. And the idea of, in my combat step, to get rid of the card that you just used to replace itself, I'm going to discard my Boros Charm. Oh my God, so miserable.
And also, Boros Charm's really like good in this matchup in some cases, so it actually counters, effectively counters a Supreme Verdict, because they have the option to...
Indestructible.
That's right. John Stern following up with a Eidolon of the Great Revel, which is actually pretty good. I mean, it does mean that it may tempt Mason to actually play the Supreme Verdict, though actually John decides to chump with it.
Yeah, see, the thing about the Eidolon there is that... Mason wants to leave it on the battlefield because the Eidolon will trigger off of all of John's spells, where it will only trigger off of some of Mason's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mason getting to 6 mana, playing Sun Titan, returning a Lone Missionary, which is even more of a dagger to the burn decks out there.
Yeah, the Vigilance on Sun Titan is pretty good in this matchup also.
Yeah, I mean, Mason's going to be able to trade with his Lone Missionary all day. John Stern does not have a card that's like a clean answer to the Sun Titan. He may have Path to Exile that he's brought in or something like that, but really just can't beat all those Lone Missionaries. So he scoops it up. So we are going to get to a game 3 of this Ameria Control versus Burn matchup.
I'm pretty excited because I cannot believe that we made it through the entirety of that game without Rich mentioning that the missionary was not lone.
If you must know, Jacob, I was looking up Diana Ross and the Supreme song so that if they cast Supreme Verdict, I could say to Ben, oh, so they were basically saying stop in the name of love. But anyway. All right, game 3.
No, it's stop in the name of life, because the Lone Missionaries gain life.
Commentate on game 3 for the viewers.
John Stern opening up with a Goblin Guide, getting Mason down to 18. Now, John is looking to deploy his next turn. Goblin Guide, still one of the more efficient sources of damage, even though Mason is kind of a land deck. He wants to make sure he hits every land, get to Ameria. Is Goblin Guide too much of a liability in this kind of matchup?
I think it's still worth it, because when you have the Goblin Guide on the first turn, it's usually going to be worth 4 damage for a single card, and that's just such a good rate. I think as the burn deck, your goal should be to resolve 6 to 7 cards. And what John really wants to be doing is pressuring a lot as early as possible, and then when possible on key turns, leaving mana untapped specifically for cards like Skullcrack.
Okay, so John Stern followed up his Goblin Guide with a Vexing Devil, which is soon to become an X-Devil because he was paid 4 life by Mason Forster, so to put it into the graveyard.
I just want to give a shout out to Johnny Spectator, who says, nice job with no glare, by the way. Thank you. We have people behind the scenes. Rashad and BJ and Athena work very hard to try and give you the best picture we possibly can. And I know it's not always completely perfect for you all, but we really appreciate when you take the time to say the things that you like as well as the things that you want us to do better. So thanks very much. I will pass that on to the team.
So John following up all those turns with a Lava Spike, bring Mason down to 8. And Mason is, this is his second turn he's going to. He's already at 8 life. He's searching a land out of his deck. If he doesn't have a Lone Missionary or a wall this turn, this could be kind of almost lights out.
Yeah, and I think even if he has a wall, things get pretty bad. If he has to pass the turn back to John, and then John's able to untap those 2 lands and get an opportunity to, essentially cast 2 more spells over the course of the next turn cycle, then Mason may already be out of this game. If Mason has the Lone Missionary, though, I think the game is almost favored for him. I think he's almost in the lead. And that was a Lone Missionary off the top of his library.
Okay, so Mason goes back up to 12 life. Johnstone enters his 3rd turn. Now he's going to see if he can kind of claw back some of that advantage that Mason took back. And he has one of the best answers in this situation. Searing Blaze after playing a land, so getting the full 3 from the landfall ability and attacking with a Goblin Guide and putting him back down to 7. So this is, shifted back, right?
Not over yet.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I was surprised to see Searing Blaze in John Stern's deck right now. And I think that was wise of him to sideboard that back in when he's on the play, because he needs a way to power himself through cards like Lone Missionary. And especially after the second game where he saw things like Phantasmal Image, he's got to expect that Searing Blaze is going to have some targets here.
Okay. After playing that Searing Blaze, he suspends a Rift Bolt. So really puts Mason to the test here. And he does have another Lone Missionary, which brings him up to 11. This is a seesawing life game.
Yes.
Like just John trying to take chunks out of his life. And, I mean, it seems like Mason Forster, Jake, he's kind of like generating an advantage, because every time he's like, playing one of these life gain cards, he's drawing a card, or it comes with a body, or things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part about this match, and it's one of the reasons why Lone Missionary is in Mason's deck. When he's playing against this burn deck, he's able to cast that card. He not only undoes a full card, or more than a full card, with the 4 life the Lone Missionary has gained, but he also gets this blocker that, essentially is worth a full card in the matchup. And, unless John Stern has a card specifically like Searing Blaze, he's going to end up really far behind on the exchange there.
Okay, so John decides to go upstairs with the Rift Bolt straight to the noggin, bringing Mason down to 8. But he still has the Lone Missionary, which can block and trade with the Goblin Guide of John Stern. So John probably has probably has an answer to that Lone Missionary, because it would probably be more efficient if he actually Rift Bolted it, if he didn't have anything there. So maybe another like Searing Blaze or something like that.
Yeah, it's also possible that John wants to leave mana open to cast a card like Skullcrack.
Mm-hmm. And there is a Searing Blaze, doing 1 this time because there's no land in John's hand, or at least he decides not to play it. And now Mason goes down to 5. after the damage from the Goblin Guide. Mason's hand kind of chock full still because he's had a few positive flips with the Goblin Guide. And he's only really played one spell a turn.
I'd like to half answer a question from chat, which was, what decks were X and O, asks Future IDK. The reason I can only half answer it is there were 10 of them, and they were 10 different archetypes, only 3 of which were from the top 8 of the Pro Tour. I don't have the full list to hand, but in terms of diversity, oh wow, yes. 10 decks, completely different, only 3 from the top 8 of the Pro Tour, and obviously we'll start funneling the top decks towards the feature match area as we head into MTG Red Zone a little later on today. Riley and Eduardo will be along to host the Open for that in about a round's time.
Okay, so Mason Forster decides to play a Gideon of the Trials and uses the Gideon emblem creating ability. So what, like, you know, why is that line interesting, Jake?
So this is really good because it forces John to use a burn spell, essentially, targeting the Gideon. The Goblin Guide itself isn't going to be enough to get that Gideon off the table. And in doing so, especially if John's last burn spell is something like a Skullcrack, for example, then what ends up happening is, you know, John is going to have to use that Skullcrack before Mason, you know, goes for whatever life gain card he has, if he has one. And it just buys him a full turn in general. Like, it's going to soak up damage, and it soaks it up in such a way that it forces John to sequence awkwardly.
Okay. So Mason down to 3, which obviously is the magical number for the burn deck.
Sweet spot is like, name any card in the deck, almost.
Yep. But as Jake said, he's actually 2 spells away because of the Gideon.
Lightning Helix.
Okay, so he's redirected the damage from the Lightning Helix to the Gideon of the Trials. But
so close.
But there's still an emblem there, so if Mason actually has another Gideon, it may actually prove to be pretty troublesome. Oh. So he's actually...
Oh, I think he may have just killed himself. He targeted the land, and then he got skullcracked.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So the thing is, by targeting John's untapped land with the Ghost Quarter, John was able to float 1 mana off that Sacred Foundry. Then John searched his library for a mountain, was able to tap that mountain for an additional red mana, and that gave him the 2 mana to cast the remaining Skullcrack that was in his hand, and Mason Forster was at 3 life. So he ritualed John into that last burn spell.
Okay, well, we went from taking turns to John's turn, and that was round number 9 from Grand Prix Toronto.